Hi, so in this video I'm going to show you how you can improve your VO2 max, not by sharing with you fancy graphics of pros going uphill faster than you can go down them. I'm going to give you 18 workouts. I'm going to talk you through them and I'm going to show you how you can divide them into 3 phases of build, push and stretch. And if you're a beginner, I'll be bold enough to say that you could see a 50% minimum increase in your VO2 if you follow this plan. So let's get right into it. The first thing that you're going to have to look for and do is a baseline test. Now, most people haven't got access to gas analysis or a laboratory or a university studio whereby they can go and take a full VO2 max test. But there are lots of DIY tests out there. You can see behind me I work with Wattbike. And we've got a range of 3-minute right through to 12, 15-minute tests that we can get an estimated VO2. So having this baseline is important, and it's super important to stop you comparing yourself against the pros. We can get Chris Froome's data of 85 millilitres per minute per kilogram. In fact, his teammate, Egan Bernal, has got a score of 90. That score of 90 is approximately double what the average male is at 40 to 45, with a female at 30 to 35. So there's a couple of things against us when we're making these comparisons. Your age, your genetics, and your gender. So it's super important when you start that you're comparing against one person, and that's you. And you watch that progress grow. Now, most amateurs, from my 30 years in performance and sports science, has shown that there's about 20% gap there in their VO2. They haven't got the time, they haven't got the specific training plan to get to their capacity for VO2. We'll find in the elite game, the pro game, most athletes are at their capacity for VO2. Let's dive straight into the workouts now. So you'll see that we start with a baseline test. Very important that you've got your test. It's repeatable, easy to conduct, and a VO2 max test shouldn't be any longer than a 3 to 6 minute workout. So once you've got that in place and you've got your score, very, very important that when you're starting in the build phase, that you start ideally with longer efforts. Now, long, 2 to 3 minutes, that's all we need. But I like to start athletes at 105 to 115%. Now remember, the block of work is going to be 15 to 20 minutes of intensity. So when we add up all the efforts, we're not going to be over that once we're working at classic VO2 max. So this is slightly under at 105 and 115. Why am I doing that? A lot of athletes go anaerobic far too quickly and they won't complete the workout. So if they go anaerobic and they can't complete, the workout is wasted. I would rather you were 5% under and complete the workout than 10% over and only get halfway through. So you've got to learn the intensity. If you haven't got power, then you're using RPE, and getting that 9 out of 10 on the RPE scale is quite hard to begin with. You'll probably overshoot it to start with, you'll die off a little bit and then kick in again, but you'll only get halfway through the effort. So here we start, classic 8 times 2, 16 minutes, but you're already at the 1-to-1 ratio. Now I would have an athlete complete this again the following week, or maybe twice in 1 week if they didn't actually get it right. So remember, it's not prescriptive when you're designing your workout to go one effort straight onto the next, straight onto the next. You've got to make sure that you've absorbed that first one and you've made sure that your body is able to adapt it and you've done it correctly. But I would add on time. So I would keep it at 8, but I would keep them at that 105, 115. So think about that. So you're only adding on a small amount of time, 2.5, but you keep the 1-to-1 ratio. So you work for 30 seconds longer, but you get 30 seconds more recovery. And then I would peak this at 3 minutes. 3 minutes on, but yeah, you're saying, oh, 8 times 3, Scott, that's 24 minutes. You've gone over the 20. Yes, but we're at that 105, 115. So an athlete may spend 105 here, 107, 110, 112, 115, 115, and they may progress through. That's a good way to get your body used to the intensity. So by the time we get to 1.4, we're going to move into classic mode. So we drop back to the 60 minutes, but now we're at 120 to 122. Now I'm going to increase that 122 as we work through the stretch and push phases. And I'll explain later on why we do that. But here we've got our 16 minutes, we've got the intensity, and we're going to push through to the end of this build phase now. But something different happens. We drop to 7 because now we want to stay inside that time zone. We don't want to go over the 20 minutes. So we increase the time, but we decrease the efforts. And then we do the same with the final one. We get it to that 3 minutes, and we've got 18 minutes. But we're 3 on, 3 off, and we're right up at that 120, 122%. And once an athlete's got to there, this may take them 5 weeks, may take them 6 weeks. We may do this one longer. We may do a couple of weeks at the start phase before we move on. It depends all on the fitness level and the experience of the rider. But once we finish this, boom, we test again. The exact same test. Measure the progress. We've now got some new levels. We've got a new VO2 max power. And then we start. Now, this phase is really important. So this push phase is when we introduce the micro efforts. Now, a lot of riders want to start micro efforts at the start. I advise you against that because it's just getting the intensity right. Get the body used to these longer efforts. Then these will feel slightly easier. You'll start off and you'll think, hey coach, I can go longer than 30 seconds at this VO2 level. That's what we want. But the idea is backing it up all the way through. Remember, VO2 is about what your muscles can do with that oxygen. Can they work with it? So in the longer efforts, what's happening is we're increasing the capillary density around that muscle. We're giving it more opportunity to deliver the oxygen into the muscle so it can use it. Remember, VO2 is not about lung capacity. It's not about huge volumes of oxygen into the system. It's about using it. So now when we push these micro sessions, I want to keep you at that 1-to-1 ratio to start with. And we're going to blast blocks of them. So we're going to start with 8 30s on, 8 30s off. This recovery time, I'm going to use 50% again. So we're working for 8 minutes, I give you 4 minutes. Honestly, if you go for 5 minutes, it's not going to make much of a difference. If you can reduce it to 3, again, not going to make much of a difference at the moment. We want to be able to maintain the output during these blocks. And this is going to gradually increase. So we go to 10. So again, going to 10, we increase the amount of efforts inside. You keep it at 1-to-1, and you make sure, even when you start, you think, I feel super strong here, I can keep this going higher. It's in this last one. So the 30 seconds off is going to allow the heart rate to continue to drift, to repay the oxygen. It will plateau and it will just start to drop. So it stays fairly high during the period. And this is why heart rate, very, very difficult to use during VO2 sessions because of the lag and the drift. But when we've got power and heart rate, we can compare it really, really well in how you're progressing. And we would work on through, you can see the pattern that's happening here. We start to increase, we work through, you control the output. Now, when I get to the 4th one, we change. We start to now eat into the recovery. So we're going to do the 10, we've got used to these 10 efforts at 30, but now we're going to reduce to 20 seconds. So now we're going to eat into that drift plateau of the heart rate. We're going to ask the body to work that little bit harder in the recovery phase. This is really important, okay? And then we gradually reduce to the classic 2-to-1 ratio. So this is much harder now because the recovery is less. Now you'll be thinking to yourself, wow, now, yeah, I can push harder in the 30s, but now I got to watch, where do I end up here? Okay, so we're almost creating a hypoxia situation where the oxygen is becoming less and less. In fact, you're getting close to altitude climate, but you're on your turbo, you're out on the road, but it's the way that the body's adapting. This is super, super progressive. Then what I like to do is finish an athlete on a session whereby we go through all of them, but I'm introducing the longer block. So I've got 15 30s here, so I get 7.5 minutes, 15 minutes, sorry, here, but I get 7.5 at the work period. But this 15 minutes, this is where ultimately we're going to go with longer micro sessions. And I'll give them 30 off there. I'll give them 1-to-1. Then I'll take it down to 12 and we'll go back to the 2-to-3. So they get 20 seconds and then we finish off with the 10 at 15. So we can make good comparisons here with the previous session. And again, when you're working through the push phase, it might take you more weeks than just you're not going to do one per week. You might do a couple of weeks here. You may do 2 of these per week. Remember, we can go to 2, and even high level of fitness, we can sometimes, when we're crashing towards an event, we can put 3 of these in over a 4-week period. Now, once we've got through here, we're then going to push to what I class as my crisscross. These are real powerful efforts, and I've worked with elite athletes right through to beginners on these and have really progressed VO2. But again, you've got to test again. So use that baseline test. Where have you come from here and here? What's the progress? So with these sessions, what we're going to do is we're going to take away some of the enthusiasm out of the rider before we then move into an FTP block. So these are really going to stretch VO2 and threshold now. So we're going to crisscross with 30 seconds, use the 1-to-1 ratio, push really hard, on, off, and then we're going to work them over 10 minutes. So we take away this time here from 10 minutes and we end up with an 8-minute period. And we're just using the workload. So the 4:30s give us 2 minutes. I've given you a little 30-second dip down there. Now you don't need to take that, and ultimately this will remove itself. But it just allows the heart rate to just drift a little bit and drop down. Allows the mindset to get ready for the effort. And then what we're doing is we're holding that FTP, but we're now holding the FTP with this extra surge in the system. So there's an increase in lactic acid and the body's then working out its steady state by still working with this higher level of acidity. Switch off, repeat. Real simple to follow. And what we do is we try to increase now the intensity at these blocks. So I add on another block and then we start to increase. We go to 6 efforts at the start. So this gives us the 3 minutes. We'll do a 7-minute. We've got 3 of them. And then as we work through, you'll see what's happening here. I then increase the time spent. So we're now going back to what we had in the build. We're doing these longer, but we've got a minute on, minute off. So this gives us 8 minutes at FTP. I take it always beyond and take it to the 3 minutes before I drop down to the classic 2 minutes into 8 minutes. And at this level, the athlete's really working now, sometimes up to 125%. By this stage, you're able to work out absorption rates, what's the relationship like with FTP and VO2, and you give that extra little bit of room so that the athlete is pushing hard. You can take away this 30-second little dip off and drive into FTP. And what's happening here is the body will be improving FTP control much more than just doing a standard block. I avoid standard FTP repeat blocks because the body will work out steady state much quicker. So the advancement of fitness is slower, even though the athlete's working super hard. And the reason is that athletes are really, really bad at recovery. So when they're actually producing FTP standard blocks of say 15-20 minutes, the impact on the inflammation is high. They're in catabolic phase for longer and they just don't listen to the body and follow a recovery process. So they'll train harder again. The output's less because the body's fatigued, they get frustrated, they go again harder the next day, they can't put out the numbers, and they're into that vicious cycle. So by following a plan like this, you will make progress with your FTP and your VO2, but it's driving the VO2 system up. You're not even hardly touching FTP. You've got short efforts, and yet you're finding that your power numbers are going up and up and up. That's the workouts. Very simple. Start with the long workouts, move to the micro, and then finish with the crisscross. Spend as long as you want in each block and you will get progress. Hey, leave a comment if you follow some of these sessions, and if you want more info, just reach out to me. I'll see you in the next video, and remember, train hard, but train smart.